The Jeffrey Epstein sex trafficking saga continues, with JPMorgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon set to be questioned for the bank's alleged role, and also a Miley Cyrus connection. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. New York federal judge Jed Rakoff ruled that JPMorgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon is to be questioned under oath for his bank's alleged involvement with Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking empire. A lot to get into there, but we want to give you a little bit of background first. So first, the financial mogul Jeffrey Epstein, he was arrested in July 2019 on federal sex trafficking charges. And awaiting his trial, as we all know, Epstein was pronounced dead in his prison cell, which was ruled a suicide by hanging. As for Jeffrey Epstein's former partner, Ghislaine Maxwell, well, she was found guilty and sentenced to 20 years in prison for conspiring with Jeffrey Epstein to sexually abuse minors. Now, there's been a lot of speculation that famous and powerful figures have been linked to Jeffrey Epstein and that have visited his island in the U.S. Virgin Islands, where Epstein would bring underage girls. A few of these people are the Duke of York, Prince Andrew, former L Brand CEO Les Wexner, attorney Alan Dershowitz, all accused, never charged. Now, JP Morgan is facing lawsuits from the U.S. Virgin Islands and an Epstein accuser, alleging that the bank facilitated Epstein's sex trafficking scheme by being his bank of choice from 1998 to 2013. In a hearing last month, a U.S. Virgin Islands lawyer told a federal judge that they have emails suggesting that a transfer of money from Epstein was going to hold, quote unquote, pending Dimon review, meaning Jamie Dimon's review. Now, the key part of that email was it was sent back in August 2008. That is very significant because in June 2008, Jeffrey Epstein pleaded guilty in Florida for soliciting prostitution of a minor. Epstein became a convicted sex offender because of this, and JP Morgan continued to be his bank for 5 years. So the Virgin Islands believe that Jamie Dimon and JP Morgan knew what Epstein was doing and they profited off of this. But that is not all, because we have learned a lot more wild revelations in a court filing, including a Miley Cyrus connection. Well, to help me break this down, you know who I'm bringing in, the expert on this case. I'm joined right now by Law&Crime's managing editor, Adam Klasfeld. Adam, thank you so much for coming back here on Sidebar to break down this, just another wild revelation in this saga.
Thank you for having me. And you're right, that wild revelation of the name Miley Cyrus coming up. A little bit of context about that. When an email was sent to a high-ranking JP Morgan executive, basically cracking a joke about will Jeffrey Epstein show up to an event with Miley Cyrus, was the year that she turned 16. She sang Sweet 16 concert in Disneyland. And that's the year where JP Morgan execs are apparently joking about their knowledge of Jeffrey Epstein's attraction to minors. And this was just, according to the Virgin Islands in this wild new complaint, an open secret that was discussed, monitored, joked about at a time when Jeffrey Epstein, as you mentioned earlier, was a convicted sex offender.
Yeah, that's not great. I did see you wrote a terrific article. It's up on Law&Crime right now about these kind of 5 big revelations from this second amended complaint. And I actually had to reread one twice because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Isn't there an allegation that the bank, JP Morgan, was providing credit and banking services to 18-year-olds?
Absolutely. So the idea was that they were essentially ignoring red flags everywhere, including money that was being, and large sums of money being paid to young women who were linked to Epstein at a time when, again, they were joking internally about this and monitoring it and raising red flags and say, should we be doing business with this person? They're extending large sums of money to these very young women.
And what was the justification, if you know, about why they were doing that?
Well, this is an evolving case. The amended complaint, as you know, was just filed. This basically shows potentially what the Virgin Islands government has gleaned during discovery since Judge Rakoff has greenlit the claims. And to take a step back here, the claims that he greenlit is the allegation, the core allegation, that JP Morgan knowingly profited from Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking scheme. So that's the accusation. And since that time, they've been trying to glean JP Morgan's internal communications. We might be seeing more of them in this second amended complaint. They are going to depose Jamie Dimon about that email that you mentioned earlier.
Let's talk about that. So Jamie Dimon, okay, he is set to be deposed, I believe, in May. It could be up to 7 hours over 2 days, a combined total 5 hours by lawyers for the U.S. Virgin Islands and an Epstein accuser, as well as up to 2 hours by lawyers of former JP Morgan Chase executive Jess Staley. So walk me through what you're expecting from that deposition, because I've been hearing Jamie Dimon didn't know anything that was going on with Jeffrey Epstein. At the same time, why would there be Jeffrey Epstein's account earmarked for Dimon review? Explain what you imagine is going to happen from this deposition, what is going to be revealed.
I think they're going to sharply question him first and foremost about that email. Now, the bank has been very insistent on this point. They have said that Jamie Dimon didn't know. Now, if that is true, according to the other evidence that we've seen, he's one of the few people in that company where, from the looks of this complaint, it's an open secret. Now, what Jamie Dimon knows is kind of tantalizing at this point. We have that email, and a lot of the other stuff before that has been under seal. We had a public document about why JP Morgan thought there was nothing there. We haven't seen the Virgin Islands document about why they think there is something there. But we know that the Virgin Islands government won that argument. So the federal judge certainly thinks that the evidence that he saw that is not yet public goes to at least support a deposition. So I'm going to wait and see here to find out what happens in the deposition. But the powerful piece of evidence that is out is that at just the immediate wake of Jeffrey Epstein's conviction for solicitation of a minor for prostitution, there was this reference to a Dimon review. The Virgin Islands government says is very clear on this point. That is Jamie Dimon, and that the timing just leaves no doubt in their minds that
Is the allegation that there were red flags that he ignored? And because here's the thing, were they restricted from doing business with him after he entered that guilty plea? Because if he enters that guilty plea, they know what he, that he solicited, he was guilty of solicitation. Is it
right.
that they knew they were prohibited from doing business with him afterwards? And what's the difference between just reviewing an account versus, knowingly facilitating illegal conduct?
Right. And I think that is what JP Morgan is hanging on right now. The fact that this controversial plea deal was so controversial because the charge didn't meet what we now know to be the crime, right? It was eventually charged with sex trafficking, and it turned out to be a prostitution charge, which was offensive to many of his minor victims. Now, what they charge, what he pled to, that might give a vestige of plausible deniability, but there was at the same time a massive amount of public information in the press that we know JP Morgan was monitoring. We know that what was written about the investigation contemporaneously showed that this wasn't just one or two alleged victims, that this was, according to reports, at least evidence of a pattern. And we have allegations and internal communications now coming to light in this lawsuit, suggesting that this was what appears to be an open secret at the bank.
Yeah, because I know that they were according to your article, the bank was monitoring reports of a DOJ investigation into Epstein's
Absolutely.
relationship with a French modeling scout who was basically, accused of being his procurer. They were wondering if they were kind of suspicious of donations that he was making to local law enforcement, Jeffrey Epstein. And then there was this, and you tell me if I'm wrong here, was there debate within the bank about whether or not they should release him as a client, whether or not he should go? Because he stayed as a customer for 3 more years after he took the guilty plea. Was there internal debate about why he should stay as a customer, a client, and why was he a client?
Actually, 5 more years after the guilty plea. He pleaded guilty in 2008, and he was a client of theirs until 2013. In 2010, the 3 more years is when one of their compliance monitors, apparently, according to this new complaint, thought maybe we need to let him go. This guy is a risky client. But 3 years after that, we know he remained on as a customer. And according to the Virgin Islands government, and I should mention, according to survivors who are suing separately at the same time here, they had numerous red flags. And we haven't even gotten to one of what they believe to be the most culpable actors here, who is Jess Staley. Who was the senior executive at the time, later became the CEO of Barclays Bank, a major UK bank, who now stands accused by one of the survivors of sexual assault, which came to light in this litigation, and exchanged allegedly 1,200 emails with Jeffrey Epstein. As a matter of fact, the allegations against Staley, who I should emphasize hasn't been criminally charged, have grown so grievous that JPMorgan is now suing him separately, saying that he acted for his own reasons if everything the Virgin Island government is saying is true. But the Virgin Island government's lawyer has been quite clear on this point. If Jess Staley is a rogue employee, she said, how is Jamie Dimon not one?
It's a good point. Adam, before we sign you off, real quick, 20 seconds. What could be the end result for JPMorgan, Jamie Dimon, Jess Staley if a jury sides against them?
Well, at minimum, a big embarrassing trial and a huge potential judgment. This is alleged violation of the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, a major federal crime. Could be a heavy judgment, and that other folks may be looking on.
You mean potential criminal charges?
I don't want to speculate on that, but certainly it's happening in the same district that charge Epstein and Maxwell, and you can make of that what you will.
Adam Klasfeld, thank you so much. It's a complicated topic, but you always break it down for us in such a great way. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
And that's all we have for you here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.